I gave them everything, and in return, they gave me a ghost in the group chat. The texts rolled in, their plans for the holidays, their jokes, but I wasn't part of them anymore, not really. They thought I wouldn't see it. Should we even tell her? I read it over and over, each word like a sharp reminder of how small they'd made me feel. But this time, I wasn't ignored. I was about to be heard. They sent Christmas cards to each other. I got a mass email. It wasn't just the email. It was the fact that I hadn't even noticed I was missing until I saw it. The photos on social media, the family dinner, the Christmas tree, the laughter, the warm embrace of people who were supposed to be my people. And there I was, invisible. I stared at my bowl of soup, the steam rising in thick curls that I couldn't even pretend to enjoy. The flickering candlelight didn't help. It never does when you're eating alone. I'd spent so many Christmases, like this, waiting for something to shift, for someone to notice, but nothing ever changed. I checked my phone again. The notification was still there, the one that told me they were all together. How long had they been celebrating without me? I couldn't even recall the last time I was invited. A year, maybe more. The pain was a dull ache now, one I couldn't quite place. I swiped through the posts. Brittany smiling, her kids all huddled close, eyes gleaming. Evan, standing next to her, hand protectively on her shoulder, his face the picture of contentment. They had everything. A family, a life built together, and I had a bowl of soup. I put the phone down, suddenly too much. I didn't need to see that. I knew the story already. They had what I'd given them, and they had no need for me anymore. No need for the woman who had once pulled them out of financial ruin. 2 years ago, I was the one they came to, the ones who swore they'd never forget my sacrifice. I paid off part of Evan's mortgage. It wasn't just money. It was my belief in them. I thought it was an investment in family, in a future together. But now I saw it for what it truly was, a transaction, a favor they'd forgotten. The sound of the drawer sliding open snapped me back to the present. My fingers found the folder, the one marked proof, the one I had left untouched for months. My hand trembled slightly as I opened it, the yellowed paper crinkling in my grip. I could almost smell the ink from the contract, the weight of the agreement in those pages, the promises that had meant nothing. I flipped through the sheets, the familiar figures and signatures filling the page. There it was, the word I had been avoiding, leverage, the word that held my power, the word I had missed while I gave them everything. I took the pen from the table, my hand, steadier now. I circled it in red dot leverage. The word stung like a shock of cold water, but it sharpened my mind. This was my moment. I had something they couldn't take away. It was in my name, in those papers, in the money that had been poured into their home. The mortgage wasn't just a debt, it was a chain that bound me, yes, but also one that I could use to break free. I leaned back in the chair, my breath steady now. The silence around me was thick, almost suffocating. It was the silence of years of unspoken resentment, of wounds I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying. But now, I saw it all clearly. I reached for my phone, the weight of the decision heavy on my shoulders. It was time to stop pretending, to stop waiting. I wasn't going to be the woman who was forgotten. I wasn't going to stay in the shadows of their lives anymore. I dialed my lawyer's number with steady fingers, hearing the rings in the background. "Can we pull up that mortgage contract?" I asked, my voice calm, but carrying something more, something they had never seen. I waited for his response, but for the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel like the woman they could forget. I felt like someone who was finally ready to step into the light. The phone buzzed in my hand. A text message from the lawyer. The contract was about to open a door I didn't even know I was ready to walk through, and suddenly, it felt like I had a choice again. They forgot I was still in the group chat. I didn't. I watched the little dots blink on my screen, the words, the plans, the happy noise of people pretending everything was normal. I was still there, still a name in their group chat, but I wasn't really there, was I? The texts rolled in one after the other. Who was bringing what to dinner? Who was in charge of the decorations? Who had bought the perfect gift for the kids? There was so much planning, so much life happening, and I wasn't a part of it. And then it came, my name, mentioned like a shadow. Should we even tell her? I froze, my stomach twisted. It wasn't the question that made my blood run cold. It was the assumption that I didn't need to know, that I wasn't worth telling. I stared at it for a moment, my finger hovering over the screen. unsure if I should scream, throw my phone, or just delete it all. I did neither. Instead, I screenshot it. The silence after that felt like it was pressing on my chest. I didn't feel angry, not yet. I felt exposed, like I had been standing in a room full of people, and someone had drawn the blinds. I forwarded the screenshot to my lawyer. No words, just that one moment of betrayal, captured in digital ink. Now, it's personal. I sent it. My thumb hovered over the screen for a second longer, feeling the weight of the words sink in. It wasn't just about the family dinner anymore. It wasn't just about a forgotten invite. It was about me, the real me. The woman they had used, the woman they had discarded. I deleted the thread then. Every word, every plan, every little piece of their world that didn't include me. It felt like a loss, but also like a release. I didn't want to be a part of their world anymore if it meant being invisible. I stood up, moved through the quiet house, and started to unpack the holiday decorations. It was a habit I kept, even when there was no one left to decorate for, even when I knew they wouldn't be there to see it. The twinkling lights, the ornaments, the soft, fake snow was all just a symbol of something I couldn't have, the idea of family, of belonging. I placed the last ornament carefully in the box and stood still for a moment. The decorations sat in front of me, half unpacked, yet I couldn't make myself finish. I packed them all up again, fast, like I was putting away my dreams in a box that would never be opened. The holiday cheer, the laughter, they were just things that didn't belong in my house anymore. The warmth of the season, it was gone, replaced by cold clarity. I exhaled deeply, my breath catching. I didn't want to feel this numb. I wanted to be angry, to shout at them, to demand answers, but the truth was simpler and far colder. I had been replaced. I sat on the couch, staring at the wall. No noise, no Christmas music, just the sound of my own breathing. A ping. I glanced at my phone. It was a message from my lawyer. You still legally hold equity, want to act on it. The words hit me harder than I expected. They weren't just words, they were power. They were mine. I had the leverage. I had the control. I hadn't realized how much I had been waiting for someone to tell me what to do, for someone to give me permission to act. But that's not how this worked anymore. I stood up, feeling the air in the room shift. For the first time in ages, I felt the pulse of life in my veins. I wasn't just sitting on the sidelines anymore. I was about to make a choice. For the first time in a long while, I felt alive. My phone buzzed again, but this time, I didn't hesitate. It was time to finally act. They wanted my blessing. I gave them a down payment. I remember the day they asked for help like it was yesterday. Their eyes full of desperation. Brittany's filled with something else I couldn't quite place, hadn't yet turned to the easy smile they wore now. Back then, they still needed me. They still needed my name, my trust. Brittany stood beside Evan in that worn-out kitchen, the air thick with something unspoken. Her smile was wide, teeth flashing, but there was no warmth in it. It was a performance, a carefully crafted show. But Evan, he had that look in his eyes, the one that made me think he actually believed in what he was saying. I should have known better. I should have known that once the money changed hands, so would the relationship. But I agreed. I agreed under the one condition that seemed reasonable then: stay close. I told myself it wasn't just a financial investment, it was a family investment. I gave them the down payment. They would build their life, and I would be a part of it. A small part, sure, but a part nonetheless. I hadn't heard them say much since. Not much that meant anything. Now, here I was, pulling the contract out of the drawer, the one I had kept in the back of my mind, tucked away with all the other quiet regrets. The signature on page one mine, Evan's on the next. But Brittany, she wasn't there. Not a single mark from her. I flipped through the pages, and it was almost like I could hear Evan's voice in my head as I read. His words promised commitment, promised cooperation, but none of that had come through, had it? Then I found it. Page 5. I stopped, my finger running along the text until it landed on the words I had missed before. Breach clause. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up as I read the fine print. A clause I had never really paid attention to. A clause that if I acted on, it would give me something I didn't think I had anymore. Control. Control. A simple word, but one that felt almost foreign now. I hadn't used it in so long. I hadn't even seen it as an option. but there it was staring at me like a cold challenge. I didn't flinch, the floodgates didn't open. There was no burst of rage, no explosion of betrayal. There was only ... silence. A quiet stillness in the room that made me feel both lost and found at the same time. I put the contract down and stared at it for a while. This wasn't about the money anymore. It wasn't about what they'd promised me or what I'd given them. It was about something deeper, something that had been eroding in me for far too long. Power. Not the kind that came from holding financial leverage over someone, not the kind they thought they could take from me, but the kind that came from deciding what I would not tolerate anymore, the kind of power that meant choosing me for once. I walked over to the kitchen counter, my fingers cold against the smooth surface as I dialed the bank's number. I'd never been one to rush, but today was different. I wasn't waiting for them to decide how things would go anymore. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times before someone picked up. My voice came out calm, even though my heart was racing in my chest. Freeze the account. Name, Walker. I didn't need to say more. The finality of those words hung in the air, and in that moment, I knew there was no turning back, no more waiting, no more silence, no more pretending I was invisible. And as I placed the phone back down, I felt something shift. It wasn't just the power of the contract. It wasn't just the legal hold I had on them. It was me. The phone buzzed again, but this time, I wasn't the one waiting. Kindness was the clause. They broke it. I printed the clause. It sat there in front of me, the ink still fresh on the paper. The weight of the words made my fingers tremble just slightly as I signed my name, not Mom, but Nora J. Walker. I couldn't bear the formality of Mom. Not now. Not after everything. I slid the letter into an envelope, sealing it tight. Certified. The word felt so final, so absolute, like a door slamming shut behind me. I had given them everything. Everything they had asked for. Everything they needed. And for what? To be ignored? To be erased? As the envelope disappeared into the mailbox, I sat on the edge of the couch. The silence of the room pressed in on me. Not the soft, gentle silence of solitude that had once been my refuge. No, this was different. This was the silence of a reckoning. I had made my move. Now, it was up to them. The phone rang, shattering the stillness. I didn't answer. The vibrations pulsed through my hand as the screen lit up, showing Evan's name. Mom, seriously. His voice broke through the airwaves, and for a second, I let it wash over me, that familiar ache of wanting to soften, of wanting to forgive. But no, I couldn't. Not this time. I had to remember what I had paid for, what they had taken from me. I let the voicemail linger, the echo of his words still hanging in the air. Mom, seriously. I pressed play again, and again. The sting of those words, the tone that implied he thought I was overreacting, that I should just let it go. I didn't let it go. Not anymore. I opened the bottle of red wine and poured myself a glass. The deep, dark liquid mirrored the shift inside me. I raised it to the fireplace, the glow of the embers catching the rim of the glass. The warmth from the fire didn't touch the cold that had settled deep in my bones, but the wine did something else. It settled my mind, allowed me to think clearly for the first time in months. I reread the letter, the clause, the words that had been so easy to overlook before. Breach of trust equals legal reversal. It was simple, clean. It was mine now, and I was done pretending it. WASN, single quotes, T, breach of trust. The phrase rang in my ears like a bell. That's what this had all been about, wasn't it? Trust, and it had been broken so many times, I lost count. But now, the breach wasn't just theirs, it was mine. It was my decision, my moment to take back what I had been denied. The phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't from Evan. It was Brittany. I stared at the screen. Her name, the woman who had once smiled at me with such warmth, now only a symbol of what I had sacrificed, for a family that no longer cared. She didn't know what was coming. I answered, and there was a brief pause before she spoke, her voice quivering with panic. Double quotes, Nora, the mortgage. It's frozen. What did you do? She asked, her breath shaky, like she was on the edge of a cliff. I didn't flinch. I didn't hesitate. I didn't feel the need to explain, to justify. I didn't need to. I had done what I had to do. I remembered what I paid for. Her sharp inhale echoed through the phone. She didn't say anything after that. The silence was deafening. She was probably reeling, trying to piece together what I had done, trying to make sense of it, but there was nothing to make sense of. This wasn't a game anymore. This was a reckoning. I hung up before she could say anything else. I didn't need to hear her plead. I didn't need to hear her excuses or explanations. I had been too patient with them for too long. For the first time in years, I felt like I was finally standing on solid ground, like I had made a choice that wasn't for them, but for me. I leaned back against the couch, staring at the fire as it flickered, a gentle reminder of the warmth I had been starved of for so long. The glass of wine was still in my hand, but I didn't drink from it. Instead, I set it down. I didn't need it anymore. I had taken control. The phone buzzed again, but this time, I wasn't the one waiting. I had finally made my move. The phone lit up. Another call. From Evan that's time. I didn't pick up. Not yet. But I knew. Something was coming. And I was ready. Built a life on my name, then erased it. I didn't plan on going back. But somehow, I found myself driving by their house. It's a strange thing, isn't it? How we find ourselves drawn to the places we think we've left behind. The house gleamed in the soft glow of the porch lights, the new car parked in the driveway, the Christmas tree framed in the window, its lights twinkling as if nothing had changed. I slowed the car, taking it all in. The life they had made on the foundation I had helped build. But there was something about it now, something different. The sight of it made my chest tighten, as if the air had thickened with the weight of all the unspoken things between us. And then I saw it. The step, the one I had poured myself, the cement still holding the imprint of my initials. The same step I had built with my own hands, the same one I had promised I would be part of forever. My initials, now weathered, barely visible but still there, still a mark of my presence. A presence they had tried to erase. I thought about how it had felt to kneel in the wet cement, watching the sun dip lower in the sky, just before the housewarming. I had been so proud, so sure of what we had built. Family, a life, all of it, underpinned by my effort, my name, my trust. It felt like another life now. The engine idled and I stayed there for a moment, my hands gripping the steering wheel. My eyes couldn't leave that step. I could still feel the rough texture of the cement beneath my fingertips. I could still hear the sound of the shovel scraping the ground as we had dug together, laughing and planning the future. But the future was gone. It had been replaced by silence and a world that didn't need me. Not anymore. I reached into my bag and pulled out the sticky note I had grabbed from the counter before I left. I didn't know why I needed it, maybe to mark the end of something, or maybe just to leave a piece of me behind. I wrote the words in bold, sharp letters. Don't worry. I'm not coming in. I stuck it to the doorframe, right where the light from the porch illuminated the note. It felt like closure, the last gesture I could give them, and the last piece of me I could leave behind. I shifted the car into drive, but before I could pull away, I glanced at the house one more time. The windows were dark now, but I could still see the silhouette of the tree. It looked so perfect, so whole. The image burned into my mind as I drove away. Back at home, I stood in front of the fireplace, watching the flames crackle and spit. I hadn't really been able to look at the housewarming photos before. It had been easier to leave them in the drawer, collecting dust, than face what they represented. But now, with nothing else to distract me, I reached for the envelope on the shelf, the one that held the last few remnants of a life I used to be part of. I opened it slowly. The paper now brittle, the edges curling from age. One by one, I pulled the photos out, the happy, sparkling faces of Evan, Brittany, the kids, all of us together in front of the house. The last picture was the one where I had held the camera. I had been there, the one who had captured the moment. But now, I couldn't recognize the woman in that picture. She felt like a stranger. I tossed the photos into the fire, one by one, until the last one flared up in flames, the edges curling and blackening. I let them burn. The heat from the fire flushed my face, and I felt the release in the silence that followed. I exhaled deeply, for the first time in days. The weight, the heaviness I had been carrying, seemed lighter now. The fire crackled, each piece of paper disintegrating, fading into ash. The house, the memories, the life we had built, it was all gone, consumed by the flames. For the first time, I wasn't sad. I wasn't angry. I was free. My phone buzzed. A message from Brittany. It was a public post. Some people ruin holidays for attention. The words hit harder than I expected, but I didn't let it affect me. Not this time. This time, I wasn't the one who needed to explain. I gave them warmth. They gave me frost. The phone hadn't stopped ringing. Each call felt like an ice pick being driven deeper into my chest, but I kept ignoring it. The voicemail light blinked one message after another, each one from Evan, from Brittany. Desperate, angry, confused. I had saved them all. Each voicemail was labeled, stored in my phone, like a small, cruel museum of their regret. Mom, why are you doing this? We need to fix this. You can't just leave us hanging. Please, pick up. We need to talk. I hadn't played them back, not yet, not until tonight. Each one a reminder of what I had lost, of what they had taken from me. But I couldn't avoid the truth anymore. I sat on the couch. The only sound in the room, the rhythmic ticking of the clock, the silence so loud it felt suffocating. I scrolled through my phone, hearing their voices in my head even before I played the recordings. I had been waiting for them to see me, to hear me, to acknowledge the price I'd paid. But all I'd gotten in return was frost. I finally tapped the first voicemail. Evan's voice came through, shaky, frantic. Mom, seriously, what the hell is going on? I let it play out, the sound of his frustration washing over me like a cold wave. I didn't need to hear more. I had lived it, hadn't I? I switched to the next one. Brittany's voice was quieter, but there was something in it now, fear, something real. She wasn't the woman who had asked me for money with that tight smile anymore. She was small, fragile. Even Nora, I don't know what to do. Please, the mortgage, the accounts, ... What did you do? I set the phone down. My hand was shaking, but it wasn't from fear. No, this was something else. It was the calm before a storm I was finally ready to face. The fire crackled in the hearth, the flames bright and warm, the room filled with the scent of wood and heat. It should have been comforting, but tonight, it felt more like an illusion, a comfort I had given myself when I should have known better. I didn't need to hear any more of their voices, not now. I stood, walking slowly toward the door. There was no way back. Not anymore. I'd made sure of that. I pulled on my coat and grabbed my purse. There was something I needed to do, something I had been avoiding for too long. I drove to the bank, my hands gripped tightly on the wheel, the lights from the street passing by like flashes of memory, flashes of a time when I still believed they needed me. I walked into the bank, the cool air of the lobby sending a chill through me. Martin, the banker, recognized me right away, his eyes flicking up from the paperwork in front of him. He knew something had shifted. There was a hardness in my eyes now. I need to make sure my name remains primary on the mortgage, I said, my voice steady, and I want to know the options I have for selling. Martin's eyes narrowed slightly, as if trying to gauge what I was really asking, but he didn't question me. Of course, you're still co-owner. We can proceed with the process anytime. I nodded, not surprised. It was always mine, wasn't it? The control, the power I'd once relinquished, was still there. Not yet, I said quietly. I'm not ready to sell. His eyebrows raised, but he didn't press. I left the bank feeling lighter, but not in the way I had hoped. I was still unsettled, still torn. The shift inside me was undeniable, but I wasn't quite sure where it was leading me yet. I returned home to the silence, to the same stillness that had become my constant companion. But there was a knock at the door. I froze. My heartbeat quickened as I walked toward it. I already knew who it was when I opened it. There was Brittany, her face a mixture of desperation and guilt, eyes red-rimmed. She didn't say anything at first, just stood there, her hand trembling slightly as she held herself back from stepping inside. I didn't invite her in. Please, Nora, she whispered, her voice fragile. We need to talk. You can't leave us like this. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. Her voice cracked, and it was the first time I heard anything close to honesty in it. She was afraid, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel sorry for her. I didn't open the door. Instead, I took a deep breath, stepped back, and gently closed it. I leaned against the door, my heart racing. I had taken back my power. I didn't write the letter to apologize. I wrote it to let them know I would never be their fallback again. I stared at the envelope. It had been sitting there for days now, unopened. It wasn't like the others, the messages, the pleading, the desperation. This letter was different. It came with a promise, the promise of change, but from me, not from them. I had been writing and rewriting the words in my mind. I can't believe it's come to this. You should have done better. I'm done being your safety net. But none of them felt right. Not the apology, not the blame. None of it. What could I possibly say? What could I possibly give? I had given everything, and they had taken it all. So what could I give now? In the end, the words I wrote weren't for them. They weren't even for me. They were for the woman who had let herself be small for so long, the one who had let them walk all over her, the one who had buried her power, hidden it under layers of obligation and family. I signed it not Mom, but Nora J. Walker. I folded it carefully and addressed it, the paper crisp and final in my hands, a small piece of me going out into the world. The silence felt different now, more purposeful, like I had finally done something for myself instead of them. I put on my coat, grabbed my keys, and drove. The world outside the window was blurring by, but I couldn't seem to escape the thoughts swirling inside me. Had they learned their lesson yet? Would they ever? I thought about Brittany standing at the door, her eyes wide with guilt, her voice cracked. I had wanted to let her in. I wanted to say everything was okay, to tell her that it was all still family, that it could still work. But I didn't. I couldn't. I parked the car outside the post office, looking up at the building, my heart racing. Was this it? Was this truly the final step? I had nothing left to say to them, nothing they deserved to hear. No more apologies. As I walked to the mailbox, I hesitated. The weight of the letter was heavier than I had anticipated. I could feel the burn in my chest, the rush of coldness that followed the heat. The floodgates had opened when I closed the door on Brittany. I had finally stepped into my own power, and I wasn't going back. I reached into the mailbox and slid the letter inside. It was like letting go of a piece of my past. The door to the post office swung closed behind me as I walked back to the car. The wind had picked up, but it didn't sting anymore. I was moving forward now. I got into the car and started the engine. I hadn't realized how much I had been holding my breath, how much tension had been in my shoulders, until it was gone. The air in the car felt lighter, as though something inside me had finally shifted. But when I checked my phone, I saw something I hadn't expected. A message from Martin at the bank. Your account has been flagged. You need to come in to resolve it. I froze. I had no idea what this was about. But deep down, a part of me already knew. The phone buzzed again. It was a voicemail from Evan's lawyer. We need to discuss the next steps regarding the mortgage. The door had already closed, behind me, but it felt like the beginning of something even bigger. They didn't bring pie. They brought paperwork. The knock came like an unwelcome guest, dragging me from the fragile quiet I'd crafted for myself. I hadn't expected them to come. Not after everything. Not after I had sealed the door between us with the finality of the letter, the one that carried my power back into my hands. But here they were, Vaughn and Brittany, standing at my doorstep, carrying more than their usual hollow apologies. I stood there for a moment, the silence hanging thick between us. They weren't here for reconciliation. They weren't here to ask for forgiveness. They were here because they knew I had taken something from them, something they couldn't afford to lose. Brittany shifted her weight uncomfortably. Evan's eyes were full of that familiar mix of guilt and frustration. Please, Nora, you can't just leave us like this. I didn't let her finish. I didn't let them in. I watched them both stand there, their bodies rigid with the tension they hadn't learned to release. Their words bounced off me like echoes in an empty room. You're abandoning us, Brittany said, a tremble in her voice. You're punishing us. The words were so familiar, so rehearsed. I could almost hear them, like a script they had memorized over the years. But I had heard. Enough. I wasn't angry, not the way they thought I would be. I wasn't sad. I wasn't even hurt. I was tired. Tired of waiting for them to change, to see me, to understand what it had cost me to keep their world spinning while mine had slowly unraveled. I leaned against the doorframe, watching them. You abandoned me first, I said, my voice quiet but firm. The weight of my words settled in the air. Evan flinched, his face flickering with surprise, but he quickly recovered. Brittany scoffed, as if the idea of me taking back what was mine was laughable. You can't just take it all away. We're family. I smiled, though it wasn't a smile that would offer any comfort. The years of silence and sacrifice had led me here, to this moment of clarity, and I wasn't going to back down. No, I said softly, my gaze steady, unwavering. I'm reclaiming my seat at the table. There was a pause, a thick, painful silence that settled between us, lingering like smoke in the room. They didn't know what to say, didn't know how to react. For the first time, I could see it in their eyes. they realized they no longer held the power. The door was closing, and they had no choice but to let it. I didn't give them a chance to speak again. I didn't need to hear any more apologies, no more hollow promises that they would change. The moment had passed. I closed the door slowly, taking my time with it, letting the finality of the action sink in. The click of the lock sounded louder than it should have, like a door closing not just between me and them, but between who I had been and who I was finally allowing myself to become. I was no longer the woman who waited. I was the woman who acted. As I stood there, my back against the cool wood, I felt something shift deep within me. There was no more hesitation, no more wondering if this was the right thing to do. This was the right thing. Then the phone buzzed, sharp and sudden. I picked it up. The name on the screen made my heart skip a beat. Martin from the bank. I didn't hesitate this time. I pressed accept. They submitted false financial documents, he said without preamble. We have leveraged, Nora. They're hiding something. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Leverage. The one thing they had hoped would bind me to their world was now the very thing that gave me the upper hand. I could feel the old familiar weight of doubt creeping back in, but I didn't let it take hold. Not now. Not anymore. Martin's next words hung in the air like a promise. Do you want to act on it? They thought I forgot. I remembered too well. The papers were spread out before me, the evidence of everything I had worked so hard to suppress, but the weight of them was different now, empowering, not burdensome. I had collected every detail, every phone call, every promise they had broken. The voicemails were still in my phone, the ones I had listened to on repeat, the ones I had saved as reminders of what they had stolen. Now, I was preparing my counterclaim. I picked up the first document and circled the key words with a red pen. Breach of trust. I didn't need to look at the rest. I knew the words by heart. The legalities, the contracts, the lies they had tried to bury. It was all there. But now I held the truth, and this truth was my weapon. I took the voicemail from Evan, the one where his voice cracked as he asked me, Mom, please, we'll do better. I didn't listen to it again. I didn't need to. I inserted it as part of my claim. His desperation, his attempts to sound sincere, were meaningless now. The damage had been done. I wrote my statement, each word a declaration of what had been broken, and why I wasn't just doing this to punish them but to protect myself. I wasn't just drawing lines anymore. I was defining new boundaries. Not to punish, but to protect. I wrote in bold. This wasn't revenge, it was preservation. The minutes passed, the weight of the decision settling deeper into my chest. I wasn't sure what I expected next, but the anxiety had a different flavor this time. It was no longer the fear of losing myself to them. It was the anticipation of moving forward. As I sealed the documents in an envelope to send to Martin, there was a light knock on the door. I didn't need to ask who it was. Jayla, my neighbor's daughter, stood there with a tray of freshly baked cookies, the warmth of the smell filling the air. She had no idea how much those cookies meant to me. In that moment, her smile was a reminder of a kindness I hadn't expected. In the last few weeks, I had been surrounded by so much bitterness, so much resentment, but here was a gesture that felt like light. I thought you might like these, Jayla said shyly, her hands still holding the tray. I smiled, genuinely. You're more family than they've been in years. She grinned, stepping forward to hand me the plate, and I felt the warmth she offered. It wasn't forced, it wasn't transactional, it was just kindness. I let myself breathe, just for a moment. I leaned against the doorframe, looking at her. For a moment before I walked back inside, I had already come so far. Maybe it was time to give myself permission to accept the moments of quiet joy, the small victories that didn't demand anything of me. I walked back to the kitchen and set the cookies down. They smelled of cinnamon and vanilla, a simple comfort, a reminder of how much I had missed small joys. But there was something else I had missed too, my own agency, my own power. The fire in the living room flickered, casting long shadows along the walls. The room was quiet again, the same stillness as before, but it felt different now, lighter, like I had found a piece of myself that had been missing for years. The phone buzzed again. I picked it up without hesitation. This time, it was a text from an anonymous number. My finger hovered over the screen. The message, just a few words, for your trust fund idea. There, attached to the message, was a check. I stared at it for a long time. The amount written in bold, overwhelming numbers. I wasn't sure who had sent it, but I knew one thing for sure: the game had just changed, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel afraid of the answer. They wrote me out, but I never needed their ink. The silence in the house was deafening, but for the first time, it felt like a blessing. I wasn't waiting for a call. I wasn't waiting for them to notice me. I had given up on that long ago. Instead, I was listening to the sound of my own thoughts, and that had become my comfort. But then, the words came, my words, my truth, written out in ink, raw and real. An op-ed titled, "Women Who Gave Too Much." It poured out of me in a rush, like the dam that had held my voice for years had finally broken. It wasn't just for Met, it was for every woman who had ever been made to feel invisible, who had been cast aside when she stopped giving, when she stopped allowing herself to be the backdrop to someone else's story. I typed it up in one sitting. The words felt like a weight lifted, but also like a seed being planted. I was angry, yes, but it wasn't the angry that comes from being overlooked. This was a different kind of fury, the one that comes from reclaiming yourself after years of erosion. When I hit send, I wasn't expecting what happened next. The post went viral, like a wildfire that couldn't be stopped. The feedback was overwhelming. Comments flooded in from women over 50. Some who had been through similar betrayals, some who simply saw the truth in my words. And then came the donations, small ones, large ones, all pouring in like a wave I had never seen coming. I hadn't expected any of this. I didn't think the world cared about what happened to me. But I realized something then. My pain wasn't mine alone. It was the collective pain of all the women who had given and given until they had nothing left to give. The letters started coming, one by one, and each one seemed to say the same thing. I see you. I hear you. You are not alone. One letter was different. It was from Jayla. She had sent me a small rosemary plant with a note that read, "For you, who taught me strength when you didn't even know it." I smiled when I read it. Jayla had no idea that she had done more for me in that moment than anyone else had in years. She had reminded me what it meant to be truly seen. I placed the plant by the window, its fresh green leaves standing tall in the sunlight. It wasn't just a gift, it was a symbol of something new, something I had planted for myself. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was growing. The room felt like a sanctuary now, a space I had carved out for myself. My writing desk, the place where I had sat for years, waiting for someone else's approval, was now mine, only mine. It was where I put my thoughts, my story, my voice. This was the beginning of something that would last far longer than any apology I had ever received. The phone buzzed again, but this time, I wasn't scared. It was a text from Martin, and though I could feel the dread begin to creep in, I held my ground. "The motion to remove you from the deed has been filed." The message read. I let it sit there for a moment, a quiet, undeniable reality. It was the final piece they were trying to take, the last link they needed to sever. But I wasn't about to let them win. I took a breath and responded, "Not yet." I hadn't even made it back to the couch when the doorbell rang. My heart skipped, a strange sense of déjà vu settling over me. I already knew who it was. Jayla had gone home hours ago, but when I opened the door, it wasn't Jayla standing there. It was Evan. And he wasn't alone. He held something in his hand. What was he holding? The weight of it was unmistakable, something more than just an apology. I braced myself, wondering if this was the end of one story or the beginning of another. He brought a peace offering. I offered him peace of mind, not access. The door had barely clicked shut before I could feel the shift in the air. Evan stood there, holding a thick album, something between a relic and a last attempt to tug at my heartstrings. His hands were steady, but his eyes, those same eyes that had once looked to me for every solution, were searching, expecting, maybe even praying that I would still be the woman who fixed things, but I had fixed enough. I reached for the album without speaking. He hadn't come for reconciliation. He hadn't come to ask for forgiveness. No, he came because the walls were closing in on him. His voice was softer than I remembered, almost hesitant, as if testing the waters he once walked in so confidently. "I didn't know how much it cost you," he said, his gaze dropping to the ground. I didn't flinch. I didn't offer comfort. Not this time. My throat was dry, but the words that rose up were clear. "I didn't need you to know. I needed you to feel it." The power I once handed over, the silence I endured, all crashed together now. A crushing reminder of how much I had given away for a seat at a table where no one saw me. He looked up at me, that familiar look of guilt filling his eyes, but I didn't soften. I could hear the past echoing in his words, the same apologies, the same hollow promises, but none of it mattered anymore. I wasn't waiting for him to fix it. I had already fixed myself. Evan hesitated, the album between us, like an unspoken challenge. His voice cracked, a flicker of vulnerability slipping through. Nora, please, can we lift the freeze? We need you too. I stopped him. I didn't need to hear him finish. Not until you learn what I paid beyond the check, I said, my voice flat but resolute. Not until you understand what was stolen from me long before you needed money. I watched the weight of those words land on him. He didn't argue. He didn't try to defend himself. He just stood there, the album heavy in his hands, the weight of years of neglect between us. He must have realized there was no easy way back. He hadn't just crossed a line. He had erased it. Without a word, I stepped back, holding the door open just long enough for him to leave the album behind. I didn't need him to apologize any more than I needed his presence. The door closed softly behind him. I walked back to the kitchen, holding the album, the smell of cookies still lingering from Jayla's visit. I ran my fingers over the leather cover. Old memories, faded smiles, the kind of memories you're supposed to cherish, but when you've been forgotten, they become just another weight you carry. I placed it on the counter, staring at it for a moment, before picking it up again and filing it away in the drawer. It wasn't a place for memories anymore. Not his memories, not theirs. The drawer was labeled "Not Yet," and it would stay that way. The door was closed, but I hadn't opened it all the way. Not yet. The phone buzzed again, but this time, I didn't reach for it right away. I felt the weight of my own decision, the space I had carved out for myself. For the first time in so long, the silence felt like mine. I wasn't just existing in it, I was breathing in it. Then the notification popped up, unmistakable and sharp. A public post from Brittany. She called me manipulative, accused me of ruining holidays for attention. I smiled softly, though there was no humor in it. Her words had no power over me anymore. She had already made her choice. And now, so had I. The doorbell rang. Jayla, sweet, innocent Jayla, answered it, and there, standing in the doorway, was Evan again. This time, he wasn't empty-handed. He was holding something. What was he holding? Something had shifted, a final attempt, or something far worse. They weaponized absence. I rewrote presence. I hadn't expected this. The feeling of control, it was unfamiliar, but it was mine. After years of surrendering my power, I finally understood what it meant to take it back. And now, as I sat with the documents spread before me, every word felt like a marker of my freedom. I wasn't just fighting to hold on anymore. I was fighting to carve out my space in the world. They thought I'd forgotten the fine print. They thought the years of quiet sacrifice would erase the foundations of my claim. But I remembered too well. The clause jumped off the page at me, hidden among the legal jargon like a buried treasure. If abandoned, the cosigner retains all future control. I ran my fingers over it as the weight of it sank in. It had been buried for so long. Brittany had never seen it, never understood its power. But I did. The power to control the future. My future. A future that wasn't tied to their expectations, to their demands. I smiled faintly. The kind of smile you wear when you realize you've had the key all along, but you're the one who has to turn the lock. I picked up the phone and dialed Martin's number without hesitation. It was time to make my move. He picked up after the second ring, his voice as steady as it had been the last time we spoke. Nora, I've reviewed the deed, he said. That clause, it's your leverage. I took a breath, steadying myself. I want to move forward with the removal of Brittany's name from the deed, I said, my voice calm but final. There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could almost hear him processing it, the weight of what I was asking settling in. It's going to escalate, Martin warned, his voice low, almost reluctant. I know, I replied. Let them rise to the moment they created. It was strange, the sense of calm I felt. In the past, I would have second-guessed myself, would have let their voices of guilt drown out my own. But now, it felt like the right thing to do, not because I wanted revenge, but because I needed to protect myself. I needed to protect the woman who had been buried under the weight of their demands for so long. I hung up the phone and stood there for a moment, letting the reality of what I'd just done wash over me. The silence in the room was soothing. For the first time, it wasn't filled with doubt or fear. It was filled with possibility. I went to the window, staring out at the city below. My reflection looked different now. stronger. Not because I had any of the answers, but because I knew I didn't need them. I walked back to the kitchen, moving to the counter where Jayla's rosemary plant stood. Its fresh green leaves looked even more vibrant now, a reminder of how far I'd come, how much I'd grown. There was something peaceful about it, something rooted. I opened the drawer and filed the documents away, each one sealing a part of my journey, my reclamation. The drawer was labeled "Not Yet," but I didn't feel the weight of it anymore. I had let go of what I didn't need and held on to what I did. The phone buzzed again, but I didn't look at it immediately. I didn't need to. For the first time, I wasn't reacting to them. I was making my own choices. I took a deep breath and closed the drawer, knowing there would be more to come. There would be more battles, more steps to take. But for now, I had what I needed. The power to decide. The doorbell rang. Jayla answered it, her usual cheer lighting up the room. But the smile faltered as she looked down at the envelope in her hand. It was from Brittany. What was inside? Some apologies arrived sealed, others just arrived too late. The envelope felt heavier than it should have, its simple exterior masking the weight of the words inside. I held it in my hands, turning it over, feeling the crinkled edges of the paper. This was no casual letter. No, it had been written with intention, each word carefully placed, handwritten, raw, a final act of reaching out. Brittany's handwriting was unmistakable, the looping curves of her letters, the pressure in certain places where she had clearly tried to keep herself steady. I didn't open it immediately. Instead, I stood there for a moment, listening to the hum of silence that had become my sanctuary. I hadn't expected an apology, not like this. And yet, here it was, a last-ditch effort to make me feel something for her. The woman who had played me for years, who had taken what I gave without a second thought, was trying to rewrite the script. I tore the envelope open slowly, each movement deliberate, savoring the silence that enveloped me. Inside, the words spilled out onto the page. Nora, I never understood the cost. I used you, I admit that. It wasn't intentional. It was survival mode. You were always there, always giving, and I took because I didn't know how to survive otherwise. I'm sorry. Didn't know how much it would cost you. I put the letter down for a moment, the room falling still around me. My fingers lingered on the paper. It was genuine, yes, but too little, too late. I didn't need her apology anymore. It wasn't going to undo the years of invisible sacrifice. It wasn't going to give me back the pieces of myself I had lost. Didn't need to hold on to this letter, this last attempt at reconciliation. I had made my peace long before this. Her words had no power over me anymore, not in the way they once would have. I walked over to the fireplace, the flames flickering and crackling, as they had done many nights before. I didn't hesitate. The paper burned quickly, curling at the edges, its ink disappearing into ash. The heat was soothing. There was no anger in it, only a quiet release. I watched it burn without hate. Only heat, only warmth that would fuel me to move forward. Jayla's voice broke the silence. Soft but there. Do you feel better? I didn't answer right away. I let the fire settle, let the heat settle in my bones. Then, I looked at her, the question hanging in the air. I paused, choosing my words carefully. I feel like I'm no longer holding her version of me. I'm not the woman she painted. I'm the woman I've become. The truth was, the apology wasn't for me. It was for her. A last attempt to absolve herself, to untangle the mess she had made with me. But it wasn't enough. She couldn't fix it with words. She couldn't fix what had been broken for too long. The silence between us felt different now, as if the air had shifted with my words. I wasn't the one holding on to the past anymore. I wasn't waiting for her to understand me, to see me. I had seen myself, and that was enough. Just as I was about to turn back to the fire, the phone buzzed. It was a message from Martin, and my heart skipped a beat as I unlocked the screen. The home sale has closed. The text read, cash in hand. For a brief moment, the weight of the words hung in the air, but this time, I didn't feel the need to act. I simply let myself breathe, letting the reality of my own strength settle over me. The past was gone. The present was mine. And the future, it was wide open. I walked back to the desk, the weight of the day settling into my shoulders. The fire's warmth wrapped around me like a protective cocoon. The ashes from the letter still smoldered on the hearth, symbols of the things I had burned away to make space for the woman I was becoming. And then, The doorbell rang again. Jayla, ever the curious one, opened the door, but this time, her expression shifted. She didn't speak, but her eyes went wide, and there, standing in the doorway, was Evan again. He was holding something. What had he brought now? I didn't downsize. I decluttered the noise. The move was a silent protest against everything I had been, a refusal to shrink any further, to settle into spaces that weren't made for me. The cottage by the river wasn't just a new home, it was a reclamation, a declaration that I didn't need to be tethered to what had been. It was small, yes, but it felt like everything I had wanted for years: peace, light, room to breathe. Jayla and I spent the afternoon unpacking, her laughter filling the quiet with the kind of joy I hadn't realized I'd missed. She was the only one who had kept me from closing the door to the world entirely. As I watched her, it struck me how much lighter I felt in this new space. The house smelled of fresh paint and wood, but outside, it was all green herbs I had planted: rosemary, mint, thyme. It was strange, the way a garden could be both a metaphor and a reality. Each plant I dug into the earth was a piece of the life I had chosen for myself now. There was no separate writing room. The space for my thoughts wasn't confined to one corner. It was the whole house. The light filtered in through the large windows, streaming over the simple corner where I kept my desk, where I would write my next chapter. No need for a door to shut it out anymore. My truth didn't need to be hidden behind walls. I opened a new red notebook, Volume 2. After them, the pages were crisp, the ink on the first few lines barely drying as I set my pen down and stared at the empty pages. They were mine to fill. They would tell my story, not theirs. Jayla, ever the generous soul, had baked cinnamon rolls that morning. The smell of them filled the house as the sun began to dip, casting a soft golden glow on everything around us. Mercy, my cat, lay sprawled in the sun patch by the door, purring in contentment, as if even she knew something had shifted. I had carved out a space for myself in this life, one I didn't need to share unless I chose to. The sound of the soft click of the kettle boiling was a sound of progress. I had not just left behind people or things, I had left behind the noise that kept me from hearing my own voice. I pulled out my phone as I sat down by the window. My op-ed had been adapted into a podcast. My words, the ones I had poured into that space, had found an audience: women who felt the same, who had been where I had. I smiled to myself as I heard the echo of their voices in the comments. A community I had unknowingly built. The recognition wasn't what mattered. What mattered was that I had made it. I had stepped into my own name, and that was all I had ever really needed. The phone buzzed again, but this time, I didn't look at it immediately. I was no longer running toward anything, no longer waiting to be seen. I had already chosen the life I wanted to live. The evening fell, and I closed my journal. The words I had written didn't carry the weight they once did. They were free, like me. A soft knock at the door jolted me from my thoughts. Always a bit more eager than necessary, opened it. I stood up, my heart racing, knowing who it was before the door even swung fully open. The stranger that had once been family, the person who had turned my world upside down, stood there holding an envelope. That it was from Brittany. What did she want now? I didn't slam it. I just turned the knob and let it shut behind me. The letter sat on the table, its edges crisp, its weight more than just paper. Brittany's handwriting filled the page, every word a reluctant confession of things left unsaid for years. The moment I'd seen the envelope, I knew it was from her, but the feeling it brought wasn't one of anticipation or urgency. No, it was more like the quiet settling of dust, something that had lingered for far too long. I opened it slowly, deliberately, as if savoring the end of a chapter that had taken too many years to write. The words inside were simple, almost painfully honest. I used you, Nora, it began. I never understood the cost. It was survival mode. I'm sorry. I didn't feel a wave of emotion. There was no storm of bitterness or anger. What I felt, instead, was an odd stillness, as if the apology was just another piece of the past, falling into place like everything else I had left behind. I let the letter rest in my hands for a moment, the paper crinkling faintly. She wanted absolution. She wanted to mend the rift between us. But what she didn't understand was that the rift had already been stitched closed. I didn't need her words anymore. I had my own. Without a second thought, I walked over to the fire, the warm glow flickering softly against the evening's chill. I tossed the letter in, and it curled into itself, the ink running away into the flame. There was no anger in it, no hate, just heat, heat that cleansed, heat that allowed me to let go without regret. I watched it burn until it was nothing but ash. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was holding on to something that no longer served me, not her apology, not the years we had wasted, not the version of myself I used to carry. Jayla's voice broke the silence, soft, as always. Do you feel better? I didn't respond right away. I let the question hang in the air, letting it float in the warmth of the room. Then, I looked at her, offering the most honest answer I could give. I feel like I'm no longer holding her version of me, I said. I'm not the woman she painted. I'm the woman I've become. It was simple, but it felt like the entire world had shifted in that one moment. I didn't need to be forgiven anymore. I didn't need anyone else to understand what had been done to me. I understood it myself, and that was enough. I could feel the weight of the past leaving me, as though every piece of that letter that turned to ash had been a piece of me, too. And now I was lighter for it. I had let go of the hurt, of the blame, of the years spent waiting for something that would never come. The silence wrapped around me like a cloak, comfortable and familiar. I didn't need to fill it. I didn't need to rush ahead. I had everything I needed in this moment. I turned back to the table, where my phone lay. The buzz of the message was faint, but there it was. I knew what it was before I even picked it up. It was Martin. The home sale has closed. The message read, cash in hand. A small, quiet smile tugged at the corners of my mouth. For so long, I had been trapped in a world of their making. But now, I had built a world for myself, and it was mine, all mine. Jayla came over with a steaming cup of tea, the warmth rising in gentle tendrils. Her smile was soft, genuine, like the daughter I had never had but had somehow found in her. She didn't know it, but she was the first person who had seen me for what I was, not for what they had wanted me to be. She handed me the cup, her eyes filled with the kind of quiet understanding that had taken me years to find within myself. You built something bigger than a family, she said, her voice almost a whisper. I looked at her, feeling the weight of her words settle inside me. I wasn't sure if she understood fully what she had said, but she didn't need to. The smile I gave her was soft, reflective. No, I said, shaking my head slightly. I built a future no one else dared to imagine. And just like that, I walked back into the house, the sunlight warm on my shoulder. The door closed softly behind me. A subtle reminder that some doors don't need to slam to leave the past behind. Sometimes, you just turn the knob and let it shut quietly. I sat back down at my desk, the red notebook still open in front of me. The first few pages I had written were now far behind me. And on the next page, I wrote, I didn't just sell a house, I bought my freedom. I closed the notebook, but something in me shifted. I had let go, and in that letting go, I had found something unexpected. Myself. A knock echoed softly at the door. Jayla opened it again, her face puzzled. She stepped back, holding an envelope, its edges familiar. It was from Claire, my estranged sister.